Okay, good. Here we go. Right. Okay, so I'm going to share some ideas of Parshas Vayechi. There is, and the idea and the theme generally, as you'll see, hopefully, develops around the concept of legacy and what that means and how what lessons we can learn from the legacy of Yaakov Avinu, which is the entire focus, obviously, of the parasha, pretty much. So there is a netziv, the netziv in Hamek Dovar. He has a broader commentary called Harchav Dovar, which is also incorporated is also what it's incorporated within the main commentary. He says that why does the parsha begin with the words Vayechi Yaakov? It's superfluous, it would seem, because we know from elsewhere these are Vayehi Mei Yaakov. So why these are how old Yaakov was, right? Vayehi Mei Yaakov, etc., etc. So why is it we need to say? Let's just find the actual words. That whole first sentence seems superfluous, and also we know exactly how old he was when he came to Mitzrayim, and therefore we know how long he lived because you can work it out. There's 17 years between when he came to Mitzrayim and when he died, so we know exactly. So the whole first line seems to be superfluous. So he says like this: what does it mean by Vayechi Yaakov? That it means he lived. He calls it Chaim Tovim Umusukonim. It was good life. It was a good life. Which was he was not accustomed to in Eretz Yisrael. Now this seems a bit counterintuitive because we know that this is the beginning of exile, Golus, right? I spoke about that last Friday night. It's an incredible insight of Moshe Shapira, the absence of the Shem Hashem, Yud-Kei Vov-Kei. So it's a remarkable thing. It's completely absent from Parshas Vayechi, V'chol asher ha'aseh Hashem matzliach. That's the last time the word Yud-Kei Vov-Kei appears, the success of Yosef HaTzadik. The next time it appears is in Vayechi l'sho'oscha kivisi Hashem, in the bracha of Don, right? Where it says, I hope for your salvation, Hashem. You look for it between all the way through Miketz, Vegash, you won't find it. And the idea is because it's all the descent into exile. The Shem Elokim you find many times, right? But not the Shem, what we call the Shem Ha'etzem, the actual name of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? It doesn't appear. And therefore, the idea is that this is very much a descent. It's representative of the fact that this is really the descent into Golus, into exile, and both metaphorically and physically, and therefore that's the message for future generations. There's much more to that whole idea and theme that's developed. You can develop throughout all of these parshias. And here, what does he mean by saying that that Yaakov had a good life, if you like, in Eretz Mitzrayim? The Harchav Dover explains like this: that this whole idea is representative again of different stages of exile and how his descendants, what they would need to undergo. The idea is that we know, he says, that Yaakov Avinu is a greater Simon Lebonov. His life is a greater sign for future generations than Avram and Yitzchak, which is an interesting idea. In the Gemara in Tanis, it says Yaakov Avinu lo meis, right? As we know, Yaakov Avinu, we have this idea that he did not die. And he says, it says that just like there's a whole Gemara in Tanis, it's just like his descendants are alive, so too he is alive. And he says it means like this, that when Yaakov goes down to Mitzrayim, and he is shown tremendous honor, and then when he goes back to, and the honor increases when he goes back to Eretz Yisrael to be buried, so too the idea is that it's representative of the latter stages of exile of Golus. So if you think about the trajectory through Miketz and Vayigash as a representation of the experience that future generations will have in terms of the experience of our Golus and what exile is, we know that towards the end, there is a period, he says, of improvement as such, the return in the time of Mashiach. And he says that's what it means. That's what it means when Yaakov returns from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael, in a way that he's shown tremendous respect, and he lives in Mitzrayim, that those 10 years of his life are positive in this sense, the way he's understanding it. So too here. This is the idea that we will also be able to see a period towards the end of light, or a light in the sense that we have, if you like, an improvement in the situation that we have in exile, just as that was reflected in Yaakov's life himself. And he says the main idea is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Avraham Avinu that they needed to be what is called an Ar Lagoyim, and therefore the idea of being a light to the rest of the world is impossible unless they are, if you like, scattered in Golus. And there are things that it seems to be saying that we can achieve through even being in a state of exile. So that's the Vayechi Yaakov. There is the ability of there is a positive idea here in being able to see a pathway, if you like, towards Mashiach, even though things are very difficult. Posuk Memches, Perek Memches Posuk Aleph. There is a Das Zakein Baalei HaTosfos, which you might have in the Mikros Golos. It appears that some of them in the back, some of them in the front, but not all of them. And the Das Zakeinim asks a very simple question. The Posuk says, your father is unwell. He takes his two children with him, Menashe and Ephraim. So the Das Zakein Baalei HaTosfos says he understands that there is a remez. He brings a hint based on gematria that who was the Vayomer Yosef. He says to Yosef, and the saying to Yosef is Ephraim. That's what it's. He was the messenger in this instance. And then he says like this: so mashma, the implication is Shelo Yosef rogil eitzel Yaakov, that Yosef didn't seem to come often to Yaakov. K'moi shemotzinu vayikra livno Yosef. There are two proofs in this posuk, right? There are two proofs in this parsha. Sorry, that Yaakov wasn't frequently visited by Yosef throughout his time in Mitzrayim. Now, that's very, very surprising, because we would expect that after all these years apart, they would spend an awful lot of time together. So why is it? And you just understand the two. Number one, he has to send a messenger, right? By Yom Yosef, it was told to Yosef, your father's unwell. So just think for a second. Normally, again, as we know, Yaakov was supposed to be the first person who could have descended gradually in terms of his health. You would be surprised that Yosef would need a messenger to be sent to him. You know, your father's ill. It's really time. You know, there's not much time. You better visit him, right? You know, it's a surprising. Shows doesn't seem to be much communication, or at least visiting. And also later on, when it says his second proof is when it says Vayikra. Where is it? Yeah, that's at the beginning. Exactly. Same thing. And there he calls him and he has to summon him, etc., etc. Right. Says it does again. The reason is the reason he says, I heard from Rabbi Shmuel is as follows. He was worried. Yosef was worried. Yaakov going into details. How did you get here? I mean, in detail, right? What happened? How did you get to Mitzrayim? The Yagid Loi, and he would have to tell him and go into detail how his brothers sold him. And then Yaakov would end up cursing them. Would destroy the whole world. His mother, we know that she cursed unintentionally, unwittingly, right? She said that whoever you find a trophim with in Parshas Vayechi won't live, and that was unwitting, unintentional. We know that the curse was fulfilled. And she died. B'derech Ephros, on the way to Ephros. Can you imagine the ramifications if he would intentionally curse the brothers? Now, this is a very big chiddush he's saying here. What he's suggesting is that two things. Number one, he's suggesting that Yaakov wasn't necessarily fully aware of the details of exactly what happened in terms of the sale, right? Which is, okay, you have to get your head around that a bit, right? Because that's not something we normally think of, right? In terms of when, remember, Yaakov, as we know, is told, right? Is told by Yosef, and you'd have to follow this back through, which we don't have time to do, back through Parshas Vayigash and Miketz and whatever. We know that Yaakov and Vayeshev, I said before, it's the longest narrative in the Torah. It's one parsha. You have to go through Vayeshev and Miketz, Vayigash, Vayechi. It's one long piece, right? So you've got to follow it back. But either way, we know that Yaakov is told that Toraf Yosef, right? Yosef is killed and he weeps and he mourns and everything else. And then he's like, Yosef is Mitzrayim, right? He's told, they tell him he's a king in Egypt. So it seems in the Das Canaan that the details of how he got there wasn't necessarily revealed to him. So Yosef, the problem is that that's okay if Yosef doesn't spend much time with him. But if Yosef spends a lot of time with him, then obviously Yaakov's going to ask, like, okay, I know you somehow survived and you did very well, and it turned out that you actually, but at the end of the day, there must be more details here. There must be more to the story, and therefore Yosef doesn't come and see him because of the ramifications of doing so are too great. Now, this Nazakanim is an amazing thing because they're separated for so long, right? There's the emotional component of wanting to see his father. Yet Yosef is governed by the fact that ultimately what needs to guide him is the priority he has for the future of the Jewish people and the unity of the family. And the risk that's involved in him spending more time with his father, desperate though he must have been to do so, is simply too great. And therefore he keeps his distance. And therefore that allows things to develop in a positive way despite everything he's been through. So it shows the greatness in this sense, right? The greatness of Yosef, that he's able to hold himself back. It's a real gevura. One of the hardest things in terms of strength is not to do something, right? Is not to do something when you feel strongly you'd like to do that, okay? It's a hugely important idea and a message. You're talking about the idea and the idea of legacy. And now what I'm gonna do is, just because it links to this in terms of the relationship of Yosef and his brothers, so I'm gonna skip right to the end of the parsha. We'll come back to some hopefully ideas in the middle. But if you now go right to the very end, almost the end, so you have the famous interaction between Yosef and his brothers. And Reb Simcha ben Pshischa asks in his Sefer Kol Simcha, he asks a number of questions on what's going on here at the end. And you'll see how this ties to the idea of the Daras Hakenim. If you look at Perek Nun, Posuk Tes Zayin, well, before that as well, Yosef is going to hate us now because they see their father's died, and it's all going to come back to visit us, the things we've done to him. And they said, your father commanded before his death, saying, Yosef, this is what you should say to Yosef, right? You should bear their sins because because of the things they've done to you. Yosef mourns, but when they speak to him, he weeps. So he asks a number of questions. Number one, he says, why does it say twice this idea of sono, to bear, right? You see it's repeated twice in that pasuk, right? Ono sono, bear or carry, lift the sin of your brothers. And vatono sono it's repeated, right? So what's the repetition? Number two, he says, why does it say the word va'ato and now sono right? Why should you? What does it mean? You now should bear the sin. I mean, what's going to do now? So it should be something which they would have asked perhaps originally before or whatever. What is the emphasis on now? Number three, he asks, why does it say Avdei Elokei Avicha, the servants of the God of your father? What does that mean? Why is that connected? Avdei Elokei Avicha. Why are they emphasizing the fact they're servants of Hashem in this context? And number four, why does Yosef cry? Vayif Yosef. B'dabram elov. Why does Yosef cry when he speaks to when they speak to him? And he answers like this. V'nireki kol machlokas hashvotim im Yosef. He says like this: the whole machlokas in Yosef and the shvotim shechoshv, they thought shekemosh mezera Avram v'Yitzchak nivcha chelek echad l'Hashem. Just like when it came to Avram and Yitzchak, only one of the children was selected to be the continuity of Klal Yisrael, right? Only one child, right? Yitzchak and then Yaakov, right? And also they had other children who were not part of. They were psulos. They were not part of Klal Yisrael. They thought when they saw that Yaakov loved Yosef more than his children, they thought as well. That's what they thought. They're going to be pushed away, and Yosef is the only one who's going to be chosen as the continuity. What changed? When they saw that Yaakov himself, before he passes away, gives individual blessings to all of them based on their own tuchunos hanefesh, the things that they need, the qualities, the character traits, right? Ozro shekulam nivchur l'Hashem. Then they saw that everything that was chosen and it was decided, they were all chosen by Hashem. Okay? Valpiza yuvan haposakated. Now we can understand what's going on. Shemekodim amru stam son olafesh achecha kira gmalucha. Right? At the beginning, first they say, bear the sin of your brothers. It's clear there has to be a clear expression of confession without any excuses, right? And va'ata, and now, right? Now, pirish achakach, pirish devreim, she'ein lahashimum kol kach. But don't. First they say, no excuses, forgive us. Then they say, now, from this point on, because of what's happened now, don't punish us so much. Because that's why we sinned. Va'ato sono, now, bear the sin of Elokei Avdei Elokei Avicha. Because you know why we sinned? Because we wanted to serve Hashem. That's why we sinned. You understand? Why did we sell you? Because we got it wrong. Because we thought that you were the only one who was going to be the servant of Hashem. You were the only one who was going to be chosen, right, to be the next in line. And we didn't want that. We couldn't bear that. We couldn't bear to be the same as Esau and Yishmael. And therefore we did this to you. That's the va'ata. And now, so not, right? First, the idea is like, you understand, any confession needs to be complete. Otherwise, it's not a confession. So the first line is the regular vidu, just forgive us. No excuses, forgive us. We did the wrong thing. But now we're going to give you a reason to forgive us. Not just quite a justification, but something that should lighten the burden of our sin. The aton, now you should forgive us when you realize that, when in other words, because of the experience of the brachas that Yaakov has now given all of us, we can understand where we went wrong, because we thought we won't be chosen at all, and it would only be you. And therefore, we did this to you. So you should bear our sin because it was only because we wanted to be Avdei Elokei Avicha, to serve Hashem, the God of your father. The Zeh, he says, Vayif Yosef b'dabram elov. And that's why Yosef mourns when they spoke to him, Shegam hu chashav kein, because he thought the same thing. He thought the same thing. He weeps because he also thought that. You understand? He also thought that he was the only one. And he was the one who, like the others, he was going to be the one who would carry the torch and the others would be discarded, right? And he wept because he realized he also made that mistake, all right? And he says, Vahavi, you should understand this because it's a very deep idea. It's a very deep perspective.
But the others were 11 of them, so none of them, they couldn't think any one of them would be the only one, particularly.
You mean
the collective of the other brothers? You
mean according to the theory that it would only be one? It could be that it wasn't so much they thought it would only be one necessarily, but it wouldn't be. They thought we don't want to all be excluded. Why can't we? Why should it go to him and not? In other words, they couldn't bear the idea of losing out. They collectively would all go to him, and they would all lose out. That's what they were trying to overcome.
One of them, 10 of them would have been.
Yeah, you mean however it would have been if it was only one, but it could have been like it may be a different number, whatever. It's the concept is that was the mistake, if you like, they made. But the point I wanted to bring out from here, apart from it's a very interesting explanation, just shutting the psukim and how it works. But I think it also links very nicely and very powerfully to this idea of legacy. You see, we just said that Yosef, great, according to the Das HaKenim, his great strength was being able to hold back to prevent something disastrous that would really perhaps even spell the end. The rejection, a curse from Yaakov and the other brothers because of what they did. And then they wouldn't be included. He held himself back so as to keep them all on board as part of the future closure, which is an incredible strength, right? But ultimately, they accept, all of them, Yosef and the brothers at the end, that they have a shared legacy. That's the message at the end. So often in life, when we talk about legacy, right, we think about ourselves. Now, what's my legacy or my own? This is something individual. One of the great messages and lessons, according to this, right, according to this way of understanding what the machlokas is and what the result is ultimately they get to a place where they understand that a legacy can be shared. You can have a legacy which is not only yours. And ultimately, they understand that together, collectively, that's the whole message of the brachos, right? Collectively, they will have to be pieces of a whole in order to, together as a group, have a shared legacy. That's the idea, I think, that we can bring out here. Right. So, 1 second. Let's just see what else we have time for here. Yeah. Let's go backwards. Let's go backwards since we're going in the wrong direction anyway. Perek Nun Pasuk Yud. Yes, Perek Nun Pasuk Yud. So you have this interesting parsha about Vayal Emoy Gam Rechev Gam Porshim Vayam Machane Koved Moed. There was a lot of people who went accompanied Yaakov Avinu. Vayavo Ad Goren Hoatod. And they reached the place called Goren Hoatod. Now, Goren Hoatod is a very unusual term. It says it was on the Ivar HaYarden, other side of the Yarden. They had this great hesped there for Yaakov. They mourned there for 7 days. What does it mean, Goren Hoatod? Says Rashi, Mukaf Atodin Hoyo. It was surrounded by thorns. It was a place surrounded by thorns. So the simple explanation is, it's a descriptive of what the place was. A Goren is a threshing floor. So it's a threshing floor surrounded by thorns. It's unusual, but that's what the first explanation is. Then Rashi carries on and says, Our Chazal say that it's called this because of what transpired in that place. Because all the kings of Canaan, Unasi Ishmael, and the princes of Ishmael came to Milchoma for battle. The Kivon Shero, Kisro Shel Yosef, when they saw the crown of Yosef, Tolui, Ba'arono Shel Yaakov, they saw it suspended on the coffin of Yaakov. Omdu Kulon, they all stood up, the Tolubo Kisraim, and they suspended their crowns on the coffin as well. The Hikifu Kasarim, and they therefore ended up surrounding it by crowns. Goren Hamukov Siog Shel Kotzin, like a threshing floor, which will be surrounded by a border of thorns. So the second pshat is that it's not just descriptive, but it is representative. It's like a metaphor, if you like, for what transpired in that place. The Goren Hoatod, just like you have a threshing floor surrounded by thorns, so too here the crowns of all these kings came and they surrounded the place and they respected Yaakov Avinu. Question is, what made them change? Because this is a Rashi, which one of those Rashis, it's a beautiful image of all of them respect they're showing to Yaakov Avinu, but they came to Milchoma, right? They didn't come for peace. They came to fight. That's what it says. They didn't just like, oh, what's going on here? This is a big procession coming out of Egypt. Let's see what's going on, just for curiosity. They came to fight, right? So what changed? When they saw Yosef's crown hanging from Yaakov's coin, game has changed. They all joined as well. So Ravom Gurovitz, Shlita Rashi of Gates, said in his Sefer Anafer Arzi Kale, he says the following idea like this. He says, the kings who came to fight with Bnei Yaakov, when they saw the crown of Yosef suspended on the Yaakov's oron, and what did that mean that Yosef puts his crown on Yaakov's coffin? It's a representation, it's a symbol that everything he achieved, Yosef achieved, and all his ascent to greatness, it was only to be a support and assistance to his father. When the king takes off his crown and places it on his father's coffin, it's the biggest representation there can be that my significance, my greatness, my royal status, that's what the crown represents, right, is not for me, it was for you, right? The Tzavaslan, he was to attach himself to him. So what happened was, they descended deeply into themselves, with this revelation, and they thought about their own role and mankind's role in this world, until they also recognized they realized the world could not be created for bloodshed and desire and all the things, all the bad midas, if you like. They realized the world was created for a man like this. a person like Yaakov Avinu. Their whole mindset was changed by this act of this great ruler from Mitzrayim, of Yosef, his crown being suspended from the coffin of his father. They realized it was such a radically different perspective. It's a beautiful idea. It's such a radically different perspective on values, on why, on life, on meaning, right? That they were used to, these kings of Canaan and the Nisei Yishmael, right? Where they were used to a mentality which was driven by all of the midos rois, right? All of the things that you should not pursue in life, right? What can we get in terms of territory and desire and lust and vengeance? All these things. That's what they were. That's what drove them. And they see something which is such a change, such a radical change, that someone who is a ruler can put his crown in his father's coffin to say, as if to say, you know, Dad, I did this all for you. I did this for you. I did this for out of respect. Kibud Av. The Sovavu Gamheim, Esarona Bikisrehem. And they surrounded also the coffin with their own crowns. Legalos Daitum, to reveal Shagam Haim, Kol Tachlison Atzavos Velazala Adam Shalom Kazeh. That their whole purpose also really should be an aspiration. They were transformed so radically that aspiration should also be that it's worth living their lives, and all of they had everything they had attained, again represented by the crown, to hang it from a coffin of a man like this, a man that could be so great that a ruler will do this for him. And because of this, they realized there's no machlokas. Why on earth? Why are we going to fight? Who are we going to fight? Right? We've got the same objective. We have one goal that joins us together. Gedugmas, Vayichan neged hahar, Ishechad b'levechad, the whole idea of coming together. In other words, and people are united by a common purpose. That's the greatest cause for unity. You can have people who dispute and disagree, and machlokas and milchama and fight, and all of them want to fight with Yahweh, and they've got all these ideas, but they can be transformed by a common vision, a common value system. That's what happens with Klal Yisrael. Vayichan sham Yisrael neged hahar. And he says that's why, that is beautiful. He says why the moshel is to a goren atod, to a threshing floor surrounded by thorns. He says, the only purpose of the thorns is to protect the threshing floor. What is the threshing floor? It's the place you prepare food. That's what ultimately it does. That's what threshing floor is. It's the key first initial stage in the preparation of food. So the thorns, whole purpose is to protect the core, is to protect the center, the values that Yaakov Avinu's life and legacy represents. And I'll just briefly summarize what he says here, because it's just a beautiful perspective on running out of time, on what we say in Tehillim, in Hallel. We say in Hallel, David HaMelech says, he says, Anil Marti v'chovzi kol ha'adam kozev. Right? When I was hasty, my haste, I said, everyone's deceitful. What does it mean, kol ha'adam kozev? Kol ha'adam kozev. When I was hasty, David HaMelech says, right? I thought that the whole of man is deceitful, that there can be people who are entirely deceitful, that there's no rewarding qualities in them at all. That's what I thought in my haste. There are people who are so bad and they're so far away and they've drifted so far. There's no redeeming features about them at all. Kol ha'adam kozev, right? Their whole personality is deceitful, is wrong, is bad. The MSC says there is not like that. In every person, David HaMelech comes to realize that every person has a nekuda of hakara belokus. Everyone has the ability to connect, has this spark within them to recognize godliness, to connect to Hashem, and that is fundamental to existence itself. The point that it's only b'chovzi, in my haste I said kol adam kozev, everyone is deceitful, where really everyone has the ability to. There is a spark inside every person. We see this even in the kings of Canaan and the Nisei Yishmael, when they see the truth, when truth is revealed to them, and real emes is revealed to them, that spark inside even them can connect to it, right? And that is what David HaMelech goes on to reveal. He says in Tehillim, his desire in life is Kos Yishois Esav Hashem Hashem Ekra, I will call in the name of Hashem. When the kings, he says, of the Ummah Ha'olam saw this image of the suspension of Yosef's crown on Yaakov's coffin, that spark within them that was not deceitful, that tiny spark that could connect to the emes, was moved, and they saw the truth, and they left the battle and hung their crowns from the coffin of Yaakov Avinu. And that's why it says as well that the Mitzrayim also were affected by this greatly, and they also respected Yaakov as a result. It all happened through that. So I think what we learn from here is there is a power within a person to leave. We talk about what the idea of a legacy is. Yeah, Yaakov Avinu, if Yaakov Avinu's life's legacy in this sense is that the impact he leaves is so great that it's able to bring out that tiny spark of spirituality, of godliness, even in people who are so far removed, because they see that this person must have lived by such a high value system that the Yosef himself can hang his crown from his coffin. And he says, you were so worthwhile that all I did in life was in order for you to succeed in your mission as the fathers, the progenitor of Klal Yisrael. And that is something which is an incredible message, a powerful and inspirational idea. The Gorin Hoatod. You can have a person who goes through life and the values they lead have such a powerful impact that even those who are so far removed, who are so distant from the story, cannot fail to be moved to the extent that they can hang their value system and change their value system by the life this person led. That's the idea. Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay.